Hiya. I'd like to talk today about Hero, a film released in 2002 starring Jet Li. So it was released when I was 20, and I'm talking about it 20 years later, right? Interestingly, the movie also mentioned the date. The only date they mentioned was June 5. So it's a sign I have to finish this today. Okay. So someone said this movie is like going to a ballet and an art gallery. Yeah, let's add epic plus history plus mystery plus love story. Deeply intellectual, emotional, and physical, of course. This movie has brilliant storytelling, cinematography, acting. I do hope you get to watch it yourself if you still haven't. Please, multiple times. And this video is just my homage to it, my impressions and reflections. So, what can I say? Maggie Chung as Flying Snow is goals. So, I'm blessed to have grown up with so many wonderful role models to look up to, particularly women. And yeah, definitely they're from perfect, right? I have no plans to be an assassin, don't worry. But how graceful and beautiful is she, right? So, in this scene, she's flying, and she's flying for half of the movie. So, aspirational. We don't have to copy everything, in our heroes, but there are traits that we want to have more of. So, in this movie, starting with the title, Hero, the film shows characters and decisions we can look up to. Love and war. You can be a fierce fighter and a fierce lover too. So, this was shown in all the characters, but perhaps most effectively with Flying Snow. So there's a spectrum of emotions that Flying Snow showed. Yes, I am fangirling, not just over her, but over the entire movie. Yeah, so yeah, let's just screenshot them all, right? I love this. So, whatever your identity is, gender, race, belief, you don't have to change, right? Like, for example, if you are a girl, you don't have to fight like a guy. Right. I love how, yeah. So the nameless hero, Jet Li, he bowed, and Maggie Chung, Flying Snow, curtsied. So that's so cute. That's so, yeah, different. Something I've never seen before. So own who you are. Whatever your identity is, they don't have to be your weaknesses. Let these be your strengths. Poetry in motion. So wow. So again, we see Nameless and Flying Snow. Earlier, they were fighting against each other, but in the story, this occurred earlier. They fought together, and interestingly, they weren't really attacking. They were defending the school they were in. And wow, such poetry and motion, and really just looking at this, I kind of want to, print every screenshot, every scene in the film and just post them all around my apartment. So, yeah, like the commenter said earlier, it's like going to an art gallery in a ballet. So, this is the graceful dance like fight between the girl and the woman characters in the film, and a fantastic use of color and nature. So you have the autumn leaves and then the air and all their flying and rotating all about. Also, this is obviously an unequal fight because one doesn't even bother to turn around, she barely does anything while the others, flailing back and forth. And there are several scenes in the movie where you have unequal fights, like the superior fighter doesn't even unsheath their weapon completely, or just lazily goes back and forth. So yeah, when you're OP, right, overpowered, while the others are mere mortals. So that's fire and earth. We also have air and water, so beautiful symmetry. Earlier we had the ladies fighting with earth and fire tones. Now we have the men fighting in air and water, depicted in shades of blue. So several times they just dipped the edge of their feet or swords in water and then they flew again. So wow. Makes you wonder, were they really able to do that previously, or it's just artist's depiction? Who knows? We've seen, very athletic people do that, right? So the king, talking to the nameless one, was wisely surmising what happened, because the nameless one was narrating what happened, but the king was also discerning, right? What really happened? So the king said, with Sky, another warrior, the nameless one, you fought in your minds. But with Broken Sword, you fought in your hearts. But your hearts were not in it. You just were content to go through the motions. So you'll understand when you see the movie what the context was. But anyway, okay, so they were fighting in their heads or in their hearts, okay. But it was still shown beautifully in the film. You still had the amazing choreography, and how amazing that each fight is different. It really complements the characters and the personalities involved. And also we have the principles of honor and duty depicted all throughout the film. So there's things that you personally want to do as yourself, but it often clashes with what you know is best for the good of all, and what makes a hero, right? Doing things not just for yourself but for the good of more people. This was connected to the fight. This was the actually the conclusion of the previous slide, the fight there. Maybe I only noticed this when I got older, right? So hiding the tears. So Jet Li, the nameless hero, was supposed to strike his opponent Broken Sword, but Nameless, at the last moment, he just changed direction and hit the water clumsily and awkwardly. Why? Because his opponent wasn't even really fighting. He couldn't care less. He was just, tending to the needs of his beloved. Years later, I'm thinking, yeah, probably, yeah, the nameless guy, he just deliberately splashed his face to hide those tears. He wasn't just hitting the water to change or to land on the water and all that. He just also wanted to hide his tears. So it was very deliberate how the camera, the director showed this. So his opponent in this fight, Broken Sword, lost the love of his life. But Nameless did not even have anyone to lose. So it makes you wonder, if I was Nameless, maybe I would cry too. Music and martial arts both deal with complex harmony. So this was discussed in the film. Yeah, so you really, you didn't just show fight scenes, you also, showed deliberately, they took pains to have a musician there, and they really requested him to please stay and play another tune for us. And you had the narrator explain, oh, because music is like martial arts. So it's one of these beautiful things that they add to the film. And it reminds me of King David in the Bible. He was a fierce warrior and also a gifted musician. And indeed, what a poetic fight this was. This was the first major fight in the film. And even though it says in the narration, they just fought in their minds, but the action there, the passion, it doesn't matter if it was just in their minds. It was in the astral plane. It's still awesome. So just like music, another analogy was made between sword fighting and calligraphy. So the brush and sword are used by the same master. Literally, you have the same hands, the same weapon or tool. So The nameless hero actually pretended to commission a scroll from Broken Sword, that other lead hero, masculine. So Nameless wanted to learn about Broken Sword's fighting technique, and he did that slyly by pretending that, oh, he wanted a scroll from the artist. Interestingly, in the English language, right, you have swords and words and literally having the same letters and practically almost the same almost the same word itself, right? So I wonder how those words came about. And there's also the saying, the pen is mightier than the sword, or the arrow in this case. Well, speaking of, the calligraphy master is a hero as well. There was an attack in his school, and he just kept doing what he's doing because that's what he is. He is an artist, he is a scribe, a writer. And he told his students the written word will outlast the arrows of their enemy. And so his students followed in his footsteps, followed his courage. They kept on writing. Even though some really were hit and killed by the arrows, they just kept what they were doing. Inner strength, Nameless tells the king. In the fight between the ladies, you had beautiful autumn colors. I personally love these colors. And there was a sudden change from yellow to orange to red. And this was the first sign for me, at least when I was watching the movie, that not all was as it seems. So, similarly, so this is Moon, the character played by Ziyi Zhang. And of course, so you have the moon and the different phases. So you may have also noticed the different color schemes. So these color schemes represent different slants of the narrative, different biases. So that's why I really recommend this film. I really love it. It's not just an action movie, it also makes you think, it also makes you feel. There's a need to use discernment. So it wasn't just a straightforward narrative after the red color scheme. But wait, there's more. You would realize, wait, that's not the complete story. The same event can be seen through different perspectives or biases. So, these color schemes, initially, right, we had a story shown in red. So, Nameless was telling the king about how the nameless hero met up with Broken Sword, Flying Snow, and Sky. The initial story was shown in red. And if you are familiar with the color theory, right, red represents passion, sensuality, anger, jealousy. If you are familiar with the chakra system, red is the lowest chakra, our base instincts. Base does not mean, primitive or inferior, no, but more or less. So they're the primal instinct, shall we say, survival mode. So the king said to Nameless after hearing that first story, "Your story sounds convincing, although I think you've misjudged one person here." Me. These two heroes, Broken Sword and Flying Snow, are not the narrow minded idiots you are describing. So that's awesome. That made me suddenly sit up and So it's not a straightforward story. Oh, there was a bias, there was a slant. So Nameless retold the story, and then we have the similar characters in blue, and they were a bit different, right? So blue represents logic, coolness, calmness, cerebral, the intellect. So we have the same characters but in significantly, somewhat different demeanors, attitudes, situations. But The blue color scheme and story wasn't the whole truth, apparently. Later on, there was another narrative in a white color scheme. So, white represents purity, nobility, all the colors, all the nuances of truth. So, just like white represents all the colors together, then perhaps that's where you have the whole truth. Doesn't mean that red is not true or blue is not true, but when you combine them, you get the whole truth. And later on, spoiler alert, there's another color scheme. We have a green color scheme, but it represented the past. But also, green is the center color in the rainbow, right? In the visible light spectrum. And also in our chakras, the center is the heart, or literal the heart of the story, the center, their origins, because that depicted the past, how these two heroes met. And it's also showing or depicting their home, how they met, and what their plans are after the war, their eventual heaven. So we say home is where the heart is. That was their goal. More on that later. So, what really happened? So, it's not just about the main events, right? What are the details? What are the context? Not just what happened, but how. So, again, look at the color schemes. So, in all cases, you have the nameless hero talking to the two main characters, the two main assassins in the library. Okay, but given that framework, you still have significantly different details that could literally color the story differently. So it's a friendly reminder for me to just keep on, seeking truth, honesty, and integrity. In listening to others, discern, is this person fully honest? Or maybe they're just, even though we are sincere, sometimes we can't help but be biased towards one or another angle. And it's not just about listening to others. How do we speak? How do we share our stories? How do we talk? Are we also being completely true? Or are we biased in a way? Here's another scene where you have three different color schemes. So it looks like this really happened. By this, I mean flying snow and the nameless hero fought, uh, witnessed by an entire army of the king of the Chin kingdom. But did flying snow really die because she was emotionally disturbed, or because she chose not to fight at all, or somewhere in between, represented by the white color scheme? What's the application to us? While we tend to go to extremes, truth is often in the overlaps. So when there are two people sharing, different sides of the story, maybe it's somewhere in between. That's where the truth is, right? We can't help but be biased, you know. It's okay. There's another theme here about giving life and taking life. I remember our main characters are assassins, right? So you have Flying Snow, Broken Sword, Sky, and the Nameless Hero. And of course, the king is also an assassin, or he's a fierce warrior. We also have Moon. She's also a young warrior in training. At the start of the film, it says some people give their life for friendship, love, or an ideal. So we see those, themes appearing again and again: friendship, love, or an ideal. But note, some people give their life while others kill for the same reasons. So, yeah. What makes you a hero? Is it because you gave your life or because you took somebody else's life? So, in the three narratives in particular, Flying Snow struck Broken Sword. So, the lady assassin struck the love of her life, yeah, the man. So, what was the reason? Was it due to petty jealousy or the greater good or both or neither? Application to us: will I live for my ideals? Will I die for them? Will I kill for them? And when you kill for them, will you kill your dearest loved ones even? And I hope we don't need to reach that point that we have to kill people, right? Interestingly, we also have a lot of superhero stories, even recent ones, where supposed good guys fought each other. So you have the Avengers Civil War, and I just learned, yeah, the Justice League turned on each other at least 10 times. So the X-Men also fought Professor X. Even the Greek gods revolted against Zeus. So okay. That's interesting. Um so apparently, it's not always as clean cut, the fight versus of good versus evil. It's not always that someone's a good guy and is fighting the bad guy. Sometimes you could have good expressed in different ways. And sadly, sometimes um, looking at good or trying to defend the good or pursuing the good means killing other people who are also trying to do good or defend the good or pursue good. There are many times in our history, in real life, right, that uh, good people are deceived into killing others because of lies. We are manipulated into hating others. There's a lot of lies, there's a lot of fear. But other times, even if there is complete truth and complete love, it's not always, you don't always see eye to eye. There still is some disagreement. Ah. And that's why it's complex, right? What is in your heart? So the lady asks the love of her life. There was an issue about the seeming rift between the two warrior lovers. At first, it seemed it was the woman who was unfaithful. And then it turned out it was the man who had a change of heart, not about their relationship, but about their main life goal: to assassinate the enemy leader, the king of the Qin army. But because of this change of heart, it still seems like a betrayal because that was all they were planning to do anyway. Okay, we're going to assassinate the Qin king and then we're going to live happily ever after in our home. That was their life plan. But somewhere along the way, the man, Broken Sword, um, he changed his mind. He had a change of heart. And it was explained why. It's quite a challenge. It's not always easy to be true to yourself and to the love of your life at the same time. But you can't keep hiding it as well, right? So, truth and love go together. But that would also imply that there will be disagreement, even discord, even separation. But maybe that's better than staying together in hate or in deception, right? Ancient wisdom. The king listens to his ancestors, represented in the film as the candles. So he said he has 100 candles. But actually, he also used his own discernment and common sense. So several times, when the nameless hero was telling him, biased stories are not telling the whole truth, he was very sharp. And that shows that he's not just a fierce, brutal fighter, but he's also using his mind. So he's a fully actualized ideal. He's fit not just physically, but mentally and spiritually too. So I really appreciate how the movie shows these well balanced and nuanced characters. And also the ideals, right? The parallels of fighting to love, to the arts. Life is complex, and the best motion pictures capture that. Yeah. Fully balanced and fully actualized, not one dimensional characters. Let the good of our country guide your decision. The king already called it our country. So it was actually at that moment still a dream. His dream of the Qin kingdom, his own kingdom, Zhao, where the nameless one came from, and other neighboring kingdoms unified. But the king of Qin already called it our country. And Broken Sword also called it our land. And in this moment, this dramatic moment, the king gave his sword freely to the nameless hero. He gave the decision. Okay, you decide. Are you going to kill me or not? Like what? So if you haven't watched the movie yet, you'll say, huh? What's happening now? But anyway, so the king said, to have been understood by a man like Broken Sword allows me to face death without fear or regret. Finally, somebody understood him. Wow. He was so happy. I mean, he said, okay, I could die now because at least I have been understood. And not just by anybody, but by somebody who is very, well deserving of respect. But of course, it doesn't mean that the king was in a hurry to die. So, right now, at that moment, he was seeking to understand the one who understood him. So, he was looking at the scroll, right? Remember, the scroll was commissioned um, to be done by Broken Sword. And he was analyzing it. He wasn't even bothering, if Nameless is going to stab him or whatever. So, okay, let's look at the scroll. This scroll reveals his highest ideals of swordsmanship, said the king. At the first stage, man and sword become interchangeable. Even a blade of grass can be used as a lethal weapon. At the next stage, the sword resides not in the hand but in the heart. Even without a weapon, the warrior can slay his enemy from 100 paces. And the ultimate stage is when the sword disappears altogether. The warrior embraces all that is around him. The desire to kill is gone. Only peace remains. Only peace remains. Earlier, Broken Sword said, the sword is not the answer. Wow. So that I think also makes them heroes because they weren't fighting for, for destruction. They were actually fighting for peace. Sadly, they were in a situation where the only way they could pursue peace was through war. But their main goal really is to have no war eventually. They weren't out killing because they loved the sight of blood or they loved, to terrorize their enemy. They actually wanted peace for their land. And that's why when they get to talk to each other, to the neighboring countries or kingdoms, right? And then if they could have peace through that, then it would be peace for all. After years of fighting, the message of peace rings true for Broken Sword, for the king, and for Nameless as well. So in the end, Nameless chooses to spare the king. Meanwhile, the lovers. I'm taking you home now, where there are no borders, no swords, nor swordsmen, where we'll simply live as man and woman. That was their dream. Unfortunately, they did not get to reach that in this life. And in their final moments, they were still just dreaming about it. And hopefully, they're able to reach that in the next life. Justice and grace. Kings are often portrayed as selfish, abusive tyrants. But in the context of deciding for a large number of people, how massive a burden this is. Trying to choose the best decision that benefits most, if not all. Can you imagine deciding for a group of people, much less, a continent of people? It's hard enough to pick a movie or restaurant for two people on a date. Have you tried that? I sometimes even can't decide for myself because, there's so many options. So, anyway, the king, no one has understood. Even those in my own court consider their king an oppressor. And yet, a man I barely knew was able to see what was in my heart, to see it so clearly. Oh, he was really touched that Broken Sword was able to see through his heart. And actually, the nameless one as well. Yeah, in the end, the nameless hero chose to spare the Chin King's life because, yeah, Broken Sword and the nameless one saw that this man is the only one who could unite all the neighboring kingdoms. So instead of oppressing, it could be seen that way, that you're oppressing all of them. But no, if you are giving them all equal rights and you are just strengthening the borders, right? But giving them equal rights and equal power, unity, then that would be a great thing. Now we're almost finished. I've found some dramatic shots of the nameless one just walking away. And whether it was a different color scheme or a different situation. Wow. So I don't know how, um of course I didn't live in China during that time, who knows what's real and what's not, right? But this unknown hero had such a profound impact on a massive empire, especially when we find out later, the context of the story. In particular, the scene of him facing certain death by arrows, the upper right there. I wonder if that inspired the scene in 300 where King Leonidas was about to die. Yeah, and all the arrows were there, but you just stand and face it. And isn't that what makes you a hero? Knowing that you are certainly going to die, but facing it anyway. Knowing that it's the best path that you could take. It was the best decision that you could make. And knowing that this will be worth it. This sacrifice is worth it. Knowing that a lot of people will benefit from this sacrifice. Wow. Unity. So this was the epilogue of the story. The king of Qin went on to conquer all of the six kingdoms and unite the country. As China's first emperor, he completed the Great Wall to protect his subjects. So it was such a beautiful story as it is, and it turns out it was only the beginning. Yes. Okay, so the movie does clarify much of this was imagined, but still, this was based on historical events. And the movie went on to say that more than 2,000 years later, the Chinese people still refer to their country as our land, as shown in the movie. This, these two words, our land. So you're depicting unity, right? Instead of all the bloodshed, of all the fighting and division. No, it's just unity. Let us unite. Unity is wonderful, but I hope there is still room for diversity. So, in particular, there was a moment during the movie when the king talked about his plans for one language to unify all the kingdoms. So that's great, right? Because you can understand each other. But what about the different nuances, the different colors, right? I hope there's a way to keep things simple and united, but retain the complexity. What about us? The philosophers and mystics say we are entering the age of Aquarius: collaboration, mutual empowerment, sovereignty, freedom. If we still have kings, let them lead us to more freedom, not less. The noble ideals of this motion picture still hold true. In conclusion, 20 years later, and I'm still tearing up. It's quite encouraging to see such movies like this, especially when in real life you encounter villains. And not just others, no, okay. Even in our own hearts, nobody's perfect, We know when we're acting like bad guys in some people's stories, right? Going back to the film. So, who's the real hero? I was so touched because every character here was a hero. You have the the traits of courage, gallantry, they're being outstanding, noble, honor, love, self-sacrifice. Such lofty ideals, and the characters lived up to them. They practiced what they believed in life and in death. And life is so complex because you can even end up on opposing sides and even kill each other for the same ideals. And again, I hope we don't need to go to that extent. The beauty of the cinematography of the film, the choreography, the music, they all complement the story perfectly. So you're not merely entertained, you're asked to think and love and live more deeply. Simply, Hero 2002 is perfect. So, thanks for watching. Hope this video and the movie itself inspires us to be the heroes in our own lives as well. So, all the best. Thank you, and till next time. Take care.